Lord of Mysteries. My Identities Echoes Across Time. Chapter 131 to 140. Congratulations, Detective Moriarty, you now possess a powerful magical item. This way, you won't have to worry about your lack of offensive power in the future. Lynn smiled as he congratulated Klein, who was familiarizing himself with the devil pistol. Then he asked suddenly, so, is the name Sherlock Moriarty a pseudonym? Cough. Klein, who was studying the devil pistol, almost choked on his own saliva. However, thanks to his clown abilities, the fool kept a straight face and replied, a name is just a designation. Whether I'm called Sherlock or Morris, it doesn't affect our friendship, does it? Klein didn't want to lie, but he knew Lynn's observational skills. Since the latter had asked, he was sure to not believe any lie. Tisk, you pass. I knew you members of secret organizations were all mysterious. Lynn pouted, seemingly forgetting his own public identity as a member of the Moses Ascetic Order and the founder of the Eye of Secrets. Detective, have you forgotten you are also a member of the Moses Ascetic Order? What right do you have to say such things? Klein couldn't help but think to himself, though he felt a sense of relief. His eyes fell on the devil pistol in his hand again, feeling a bit troubled. A story with himself as the protagonist. He had never written a book before. However, since Mr. Keeper said it could be made up, he thought of simply retelling the novels he had read and changing the protagonist. After all, it wouldn't be published. Just then, he noticed Lynn looking at him with eager eyes. Detective Moriarty, as your friend, I am obliged to be the audience when you need to tell a story. Lynn said righteously. Klein, you think I can't see that you just want to watch my embarrassment? How about I sacrifice the devil pistol to the gray fog and only take it out when needed? No, if something unexpected happens and the devil pistol doesn't work, it would be bad. Better to tell stories every day. Klein's thoughts spun but were eventually dismissed one by one. Despite being one of the most annoying magical items with sentience, Klein was only at sequence 8 and not yet proficient in controlling Saphira Castle. He didn't know there was a skill called bargaining with magical items. Fortunately, Klein didn't realize this. Otherwise, the devil pistol might have ended up living a pitiful life like Little Hunger. Sigh. Klein sighed, glanced at the eager Lynn, and nodded heavily. All right. There was no other way. Among the people he knew, there weren't many suitable to be his audience. Lynn was one, and the poet friend barely counted. However, Klein hadn't seen Leonard for several days. Though Klein had some idea of his whereabouts, having heard from Archbishop Crestet Sesimir that Leonard had taken on a bodyguard mission due to the involvement of a noble in the demon dog incident. Since Leonard wasn't around, only Lynn could be his audience. Klein sighed inwardly, just as he saw the detective take out a familiar notebook. If he remembered correctly, it was Lynn's drawing notebook. Then Klein heard Lynn's eager voice. If you don't mind, can I illustrate your stories? Klein, you just want to see me embarrassed. Klein's mouth twitched as he looked at the detective who was clearly itching to draw. He sighed, draw if you want, but it can't be shared. Klein didn't want to compromise, but he knew he couldn't stop the detective. Of course, Lynn nodded without hesitation. He wouldn't spread the illustrations, at most using them in the future to awaken Mr. Fool's humanity when needed. Ah, I'm so forward-thinking, going to great lengths to keep Mr. Fool humane. Lynn shamelessly praised himself in his mind, suddenly remembering his agreement with a certain big snake. I wonder when Ouroboros will deliver Amon's surprise. Given Little Red's enmity, Ouroboros shouldn't oppose such a prank, right? Lynn thought uncertainly, deciding to increase his efforts and complete a few more paintings. Meanwhile, in the forsaken land of the gods. Snake, what brings you here today? A man in a black classical robe, matching pointy hat, and crystal monocle, with black curly hair, black eyes, a broad forehead, and a lean face, smiled. As he spoke, he adjusted his crystal monocle. This man was none other than Amon, the Angel of Time, the true and only son of the ancient sun god, and the fifth epic's blasphemer. Ads by PubFuture, and standing before him was Ouroboros. Though both resided in the forsaken land of the gods, the Angel of Time and the Angel of Fate rarely met, especially after Medici was stewed in a hot pot. They had been practically strangers. Hence, Amon was genuinely surprised by Ouroboros' sudden visit. "I come bearing a gift for you, on behalf of someone," Ouroboros said indifferently, without any expression. "A gift?" Amon's eyes fell on the object Ouroboros was holding, which looked like a painting. Since the front was completely covered, Amon couldn't see what it depicted. For some reason, though, Amon had a bad feeling. "Yes, a gift." Ouroboros nodded and handed the painting to Amon. Amon took it curiously, and upon seeing the painting's content, his expression froze. The recent painful memories, whether from being blown up or sealed as a child and then having his face pinched by someone, flooded back. Amon felt an impulse to destroy the painting on the spot. TN. Such pettiness. I love it. ... Chapter end. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. As everyone knows, Amon is a relatively rational person. Even though painful memories surged up, Amon restrained the impulse to destroy the painting in his hand. The Angel of Time then raised his head, his sharp gaze falling on Ouroboros, and said, "It seems you know him." "I'm not sure if I can say I know him," Ouroboros replied calmly, not worried about what Amon might do to him. Although he couldn't defeat Amon, this was the forsaken land of the gods, the territory of the true creator. If Amon dared to act against Ouroboros here, the true creator would let Amon experience what paternal love as overwhelming as mountains and earth shakes feels like. So Ouroboros added, "But I quite like him." This wasn't a lie because Ouroboros indeed had a favorable impression of someone who could control Amon. "The world has suffered from Amon for too long," is not an empty statement. Who exactly is he? Amon asked. While he could judge that Libert Abraham's identity was certainly extraordinary, Amon wasn't sure exactly who he was. "Don't know." Ouroboros shook his head honestly. After thinking for a moment, he added, "But even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you." Amon didn't know how to evaluate the angel of fate in front of him. He wasn't willing to trouble Ouroboros, knowing he might face paternal love. So Amon said, "Since the gift has been delivered, you can leave if there's nothing else." Ouroboros looked at Amon expressionlessly, then turned around. Before leaving, he remembered something and turned back. "I'll be sending many more such gifts in the future. I hope you like them." Then he really left. Amon watched Ouroboros' departing figure, his gaze returning to the painting in his hand, his expression enigmatic. He understood what Ouroboros' words implied. Perhaps even that foolish snake didn't realize, but Amon, who had been tricked by Lynn twice, knew it meant someone was preparing many surprises for him. And these surprises were something Amon himself couldn't refuse or take effective action against. He couldn't go back in time, nor stop someone's misdeeds. "I never thought there would be a day when I could only wait for results." Interesting. But Amon remained Amon. Although his mind was slightly cracked, he maintained outward calm and didn't destroy the painting. He just expressionlessly held the painting and disappeared from the spot. Lynn's plan to search for Will with Mr. Fool at the Quelaag Club failed. Maybe a certain snake of destiny sensed something wrong in advance, or maybe Mr. Fool's bait wasn't enticing enough. In any case, Lynn and Klein did not find Will's whereabouts at the Quelaag Club. Even Will's future father was nowhere to be found. According to Lynn's investigation, the surgeon seemed to have gone on a trip temporarily, but where he went was unknown. Lynn, got it, the little snake definitely sensed something and is hiding from me. Although with Mr. Fool around, it's almost certain to meet the little snake in the future. That's too long. I can't wait that long. If I can't find you in the 5th epoch, let me find you in the 4th epoch. Lynn muttered in his heart. He was not someone who would easily give up. Or rather, if he had found the little snake smoothly in the 5th epoch, he might not care so much. But since Will was hiding from him, Lynn's rebellious spirit was aroused. So, unable to meet the 5th epoch's little snake, Lynn decided to meet the 4th epoch's Will directly. Ads by PubFuture. Even if he was alone and helpless in the 5th epoch, he could at least pull in Mr. Door in the 4th epoch. To catch a certain snake, even if he couldn't find him, he could start with his followers. As long as he could catch even the slightest clue, Lynn didn't believe the little snake could run away from Mr. Door. Really? I didn't say I would definitely persecute you. What are you hiding for, making it so troublesome for me? Lynn thought without any self-awareness, then looked up at the death console in front of him saying goodbye. Behind him was the port they came from, with the ship that would take them back already docked. That's right, Lynn's visit to Byam had come to an end. Although he didn't know what Mr. Door, Amon, and the God of Death discussed, and didn't care, he was quite satisfied with this trip. After all, he had pried away the God of Death's cornerstone, bombed Amon twice, and even until this day, Amon was still sealed in his child form. Great. Lynn's gaze fell on the child form of Amon, and he sincerely felt great. When he returned to the Tudor Empire, and Amon's hapless colleagues knew about Amon's current state, it would surely be an even greater scene. Lynn sincerely hoped that the big shots could take their revenge and not be polite with Amon. And he would definitely compile these events into an illustrated book, spreading it far and wide, to ensure Amon's deeds would be remembered for a long time. While thinking about this, he saw Death Consul Azek finally finish his meaningless polite talk, and smiled at him. Don't forget to write me a letter, Azek. I'm looking forward to your reply. Lynn blinked and continued, if you have time, why not come to the Tudor Empire for a few days? With Bethel around, the journey is not a problem. I think His Majesty the Lord of the Underworld won't mind his loyal consul having a short vacation, right? Azek's expression stiffened slightly but quickly returned to normal. He nodded, if His Majesty allows, I will visit the Tudor Empire when I have a vacation. Then I look forward to that day coming soon, Lynn said with a smile. In public, he didn't continue to pry the God of Death's cornerstone. He just stretched his arm, rubbed the child form of Amon's head fiercely, and under the terrified gazes of others, boarded the ship back to Tudor. Azek watched them leave, feeling a sense of relief mixed with a faint sense of loss. He closed his eyes, recalling Lynn's various words during this period, those words that shook him and made him feel lost, seemingly engraved in his mind. Even though the person had left, Death Consul Azek could still hear those enticing words. End of chapter. Truly a terrifying existence. Death Consul Azek couldn't help but mumble again. But, not detestable. Perhaps he should indeed write to that young angel, and in the future, visit the Tudor Empire. Anyway, Azek thought as he glanced far towards the direction of the Balam Empire Palace. You don't oppose this either, do you? Your Majesty. Bethel, do you know Will? On the ship returning to the Tudor Empire, Lynn asked casually while looking at the increasingly distant port. Hearing this, Bethel Abraham was taken aback and hesitated before saying, you mean the snake of Mercury of the Wheel of Fortune pathway? So, the little snake in the fourth epic is also called Will. Lynn raised an eyebrow but wasn't surprised. He nodded, yes, that's him. Do you know him? We've had some interactions, but we're not particularly close. Why do you ask? Bethel Abraham said, hesitating for a moment before asking, do you want to meet him? Yes, I want to meet him. When Bethel said he had some connection with Will, Lynn's eyes lit up. He made no secret of his interest in the snake, eagerly saying, so could you introduce me to him? I'd like to be friends with him. Bethel Abraham, are you sure you want to be friends and not persecute him? Having learned a certain term from Lynn, Mr. Door couldn't help but think about what Lynn was planning and what he intended to do. By now, Bethel Abraham had fully understood Lynn's mischievous nature. He knew that although the possibly great old one was really strong, his character was unpredictable. The only consolation for Mr. Door was that Lynn didn't seem interested in persecuting him. Instead, his attention was focused on Azek, the death consul of the Balam Empire, and a certain unnamed angel of time. Fortunately, Lynn doesn't seem interested in persecuting me, Bethel Abraham thought, keeping a straight face as he said, I remember his old address. Though I'm not sure if Will has abandoned it, I will help you find him if he's not there. Without a doubt, between persecuting others and being persecuted, Mr. Door unhesitatingly chose to assist in the persecution. Thanks, Bethel. Whether or not we find Will, I owe you one. Lynn wasn't surprised by Bethel's choice. He then smiled and said, I hope Will doesn't hide from me, or I will be very angry. So, Will, if you really can get hints from fate, don't hide from me. This is my sincere advice. The mischievous Lynn thought as he consciously omitted his malice. After failing to bait in the fifth epic, Lynn had this reverse operation in mind. If Will ran away because of fate's warning, he would make it clear that running away would result in worse consequences. In the fifth epic, Lynn couldn't do this, but in the fourth epic, he had some leverage. Although this makes me feel like a villain, it must be an illusion. Lynn shook his head, smoothing over his non-existent conscience. He became more eager to meet the little snake. I wonder what the reaction of the fifth epic's little snake will be when I catch the one in the fourth epic. It should be quite a shock. Meanwhile, somewhere in the fourth epic, a certain snake of Mercury was feeling the reminder from fate and fell silent. Meeting will lead to an unfortunate outcome. Avoiding will lead to an even more unfortunate outcome. Although he hadn't met the mischievous one yet, the Mercury snake already felt a headache coming on. Is he being targeted by some strange person? But neither meeting nor avoiding poses a life-threatening danger. So, the other party doesn't have clear malicious intent but seems to want to tease me. Will muttered uncertainly, his expression filled with confusion and puzzlement. Will naturally didn't know that he was carrying the blame for the fifth epic's self. If Lynn had met the little snake in the fifth epic, he wouldn't be so interested in the one in the fourth epic. Although Mr. Dorr promised to help Lynn find Will, that was something for after they returned to the Tudor Empire. Until then, Lynn naturally kept himself busy. For instance, finding opportunities to persecute Amon, and more persecuting Amon, and still more persecuting Amon. It's not that the Angel of Time has a good temper, but mostly because Amon's seal wasn't lifted, and most of his means were ineffective against Lynn. Moreover, Mr. Dorr was around, so Amon chose to ignore some of Lynn's childish behaviors, like pinching his cheeks or patting his head. In this aspect, Amon, who had countless avatars and loved playing various roles, adapted quickly. Initially uncomfortable with Lynn's persecution, he soon learned to use his childlike state to win Lynn's sympathy. Because Amon noticed that although Lynn was still a rascal to him in his childlike state, he was relatively less so. This might be due to the humanity in Lynn. Amon naturally despised this, but it didn't stop him from taking advantage of it. Just like in the original story, when he took Klein away and almost fooled him by playing the role of a mentor and friend, Amon was always adept at manipulating and gaining others' trust. Seeing all this, Lynn thought, please keep it up, give me more blackmail material. Lynn indeed couldn't treat child Amon the same way as adult Amon, but so what? Everything he did was not only to satisfy his own evil pleasure but also to persecute the future's adult Amon. End of chapter. Every compromise made by child Amon in the present will become part of Amon's dark history in the future. Even if Amon now adapts to his childlike state, can he truly ignore the spread of this dark history? Lynn eagerly anticipated the day when this would unfold and firmly stated, though he couldn't be as harsh as others towards child Amon, he wouldn't be swayed by Amon's false friendliness. After all, Amon wasn't truly a child nor was he genuinely being friendly. But if Amon had any malicious intentions, there was nothing to say, a good beating would solve it. Lynn wasn't interested in playing mind games with these old foxes. Amon could try any tricks he wanted, but no matter what unexpected events happened, Lynn would always blame Amon. Simple, brutal, but effective. Mr. Dorr, who observed everything. In any case, it was fortunate nothing affected him. Today, Bethel was still thankful he wasn't the target of Lynn's persecution. Sharp as ever, he vaguely sensed that the reason Lynn didn't persecute him like the others was due to some not-so-good future. I assure you, you will have an outcome that isn't so bad. Bethel couldn't help but recall what Lynn had told him back in the Balaam Empire while watching Lynn tease child Amon from a distance, the latter clearly trying to gain sympathy. So what kind of future would it be? Bethel almost instinctively thought, various possibilities flashing through his mind, ultimately settling on a single word, outer God. Given his situation, Bethel figured the greatest possibility was that he might be captured, polluted, or even become a weapon for the outer gods to destroy this world. Thinking of such a possibility, Bethel almost instinctively frowned. He wasn't really afraid of perishing. After all, as an angel king who had lived through so much, Mr. Dorr had long become indifferent to life and death. So, more than death, Bethel feared being polluted by outer gods, which was a fate worse than death. If that day ever comes, death would be the best outcome for me. Bethel murmured softly, then thought of something, but if I die, the one most likely to become the fool would be. Mr. Dorr knew his colleagues well, so he was very aware that among the pathways of apprentice, seer, and marauder, the most likely to ascend and become a pillar were him, Amon, and Antigonus. Among them, Antigonus was the least likely to succeed. Bethel was somewhat aware of his situation. The consciousness of the Lord of Mysteries within Antigonus had awakened more than in him and Amon, and he was already walking a tightrope. Perhaps one day, Antigonus might lose control due to the excessive revival of the Lord of Mysteries consciousness within him. And honestly, Bethel didn't think Antigonus could outplay Amon. That little wolf was no match for Amon and Adam. Even integrating the uniqueness of the fool had been something Adam and Amon helped with. So if something happens to me, Amon would be the most likely to become the fool. Bethel's gaze fell on child Amon, suddenly becoming pessimistic about the world's future. It wasn't that Mr. Dorr didn't trust Amon. Rather, based on his understanding of Amon, he couldn't imagine this lawless troublemaker, after becoming the fool, would fight the outer gods for the sake of all beings. Most likely, Amon would take the benefits and push all the responsibilities onto others. What a terrible outcome. Bethel couldn't help but sigh, his eyes landing on Lynn, who was as mischievous as Amon. Memories of Lynn beating up the mother tree of desire surfaced, and Bethel fell silent. What had happened to this world? Was being a troublemaker some hidden standard for becoming an above the sequence? Ads by PubFuture. Mr. Dorr fell into contemplation. Why do I feel you're thinking of something unpleasant? At that moment, Bethel suddenly heard someone speaking. He looked up, unsurprised to see Lynn, who had finished tormenting Amon, standing beside him, looking refreshed and curious. Just thinking about the world's future, Bethel said honestly. He didn't see it as something to hide, especially since the person before him might understand the future best. The future. Lynn repeated the word, almost immediately guessing Bethel's thoughts. He leaned against the railing, looking at the birds in the sky, and smiled. The future is of course beautiful. Or, do you not trust me, Bethel? The young angel bathed in sunlight, his smile confident, his gaze resolute, as if stating a fact. Bethel remained silent for a moment, the gloom in his mind suddenly dispersing. His expression unchanged, still slightly stern, he asked seriously, if I say I don't believe you, will you beat me? The tone was serious, as if solemnly inquiring. Lynn was momentarily stunned, then laughed heartily. Ha ha, Bethel, you can actually joke. I am still a normal person to some extent. Seeing Lynn laugh so hard he was nearly breathless, Bethel's expression turned slightly helpless, but he said seriously. But, Bethel joking so earnestly, it's really out of place. Lynn wiped away his tears of laughter and continued, but it's good. I suggest you joke with the butler more often. He'd probably be happy. Bethel imagined the butler's possible reactions, his expression turning subtle, and he said, before getting happy, he might suspect I've taken the wrong medicine. Yes, exactly, keep it up. This kind of factual joke suits you well. Lynn nodded approvingly, affirming Mr. Dorr's sense of humor. Then, as if remembering something, he asked, Bethel, by the way, do you have any hobbies? I haven't seen any particular interests of yours, and that's not good. At your level, you need to maintain your humanity well. Based on my experience, cultivating special hobbies helps maintain humanity better. Lynn's face showed eager anticipation, clearly having some brilliant ideas. I do have hobbies. Bethel's heart skipped a beat at this, and after a glance at Lynn, he hesitated but then said, I like collecting precious gems. End of chapter. Lynn quietly listened and summarized, so your hobbies are gems, travel, and reading. Is that not allowed? Bethel looked at him, not feeling there was anything wrong with his hobbies. It's not that it's not allowed, but don't you think these hobbies are too ordinary? You should cultivate some, more stimulating hobbies, Lynn said, rubbing his chin, an eager expression on his face. For example, Bethel hesitated before asking, following his lead. For example, writing little essays to persecute others. Lynn suggested, rubbing his chin. Before Bethel could retort, he continued, Although Butler said you don't particularly like the Abraham family's internal atmosphere, in reality, you don't hate it that much, right? Otherwise, you would have already taken action to correct it. With your status in the Abraham family, no one would oppose you. Ultimately, you enjoy the overly cheerful atmosphere within the Abraham family. Hearing this, Bethel initially frowned, but then had to admit Lynn was right. Mr. Dorr didn't actually dislike the Abraham family's gossip culture that much. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep saying he would change it but never actually did. He allowed the youngsters in the family to become bolder, even casually brushing off complaints from those involved in the gossip. The Abraham family's fondness for speculation and writing little essays was entirely due to Mr. Dorr's indulgence. And you also write travel diaries yourself. Ultimately, fan fiction and travel diaries aren't too different, Lynn continued to persuade. You can record some things you know as diaries, add some embellishments, and then read them out loud in front of the involved parties at the right time. Trust me, this not only stimulates your humanity but also greatly stimulates the involved party's humanity. Bethel, it sounds outrageous at first, but thinking carefully, it makes some sense. This will likely lead to fights. Bethel Abraham couldn't help but voice his thoughts. Then let the enemies of the involved parties read it. Trust me, most people won't miss the chance to socially ruin their enemies. They won't mind fighting, since they're already enemies, Lynn said matter-of-factly, his tone gentle and his smile kind and harmless. At that time, you'll even get the gratitude of some people. Bethel, should I say, as expected of you. Although not a complex scheme, Mr. Dorr felt a sense of great shock, as if a new world had opened up. Of course, if you're not satisfied with this hobby, you can teach and help others, like learning from the Snake of Mercury and restarting every so often to experience life anew. Although you can't restart madness like the Snake of Mercury, the various emotions you gain during life's experiences can serve as your anchors, Lynn suggested, then looked seriously at Mr. Dorr, adding, of course, don't be a scumbag. If you get married and have children while experiencing life, don't be an irresponsible scumbag, or I'll despise you. I am not an irresponsible person. If I ever have a wife and children, I would never abandon them, Bethel Abraham said seriously. Although he had never considered getting married or having children, he was definitely not irresponsible. I actually believe you on that point, since you're not like Amon, who is such a scumbag. Lynn nodded, taking a jab at Amon, then continued, I know that to many of you, mortals may seem like ants. Even if some of you choose to protect them, you still look down on them. But don't underestimate mortals, and don't underestimate humanity. Lynn paused here, looked at Mr. Dorr with a smile, and said, perhaps a mortal you don't care about will become your most important anchor. Bethel was taken aback, almost instinctively wanting to refute, but swallowed his words before they left his mouth. Eventually, he just said, it seems Libert cares a lot about mortals. I don't know. Lynn thought for a moment, then shook his head uncertainly. Rather than saying I care about mortals, I'd say I just like the emotions they have. Love, hate, sadness, joy, I like them all. Only by truly experiencing these emotions do I feel that I still exist and not just be. Lynn paused here, his expression becoming momentarily dazed, then continued, a phantom. Lynn was well aware of what it was like to be emotionless, so he cherished his emotions deeply. Ads by PubFuture. Hearing this, Bethel looked at Lynn, at his slightly dazed expression, and his eyes showed a hint of contemplation, but he asked nothing more, only saying, so, is Libert enthusiastic about persecuting others to maintain his humanity? You could say that, persecuting others is indeed very enjoyable. I think you should try it, Bethel. Lynn's expression returned to normal, urging him. For example, how about writing this trip to Balam as a travel diary? Remove the parts that can't be revealed, and focus on the shrunken Amon and the hardships he suffered. Trust me, your travel diary will be very popular. Finally, Lynn's true intention was revealed. He wanted to use Mr. Dorr's hand to spread Amon's miserable condition far and wide. From this perspective, Lynn was truly steadfast in persecuting Amon. Realizing Lynn's goal, Mr. Dorr, Amon, you've really had terrible luck getting on his bad side. Despite the internal complaints, Bethel Abraham seriously considered the feasibility of such actions. Though Lynn's suggestions sounded outrageous, considering various facts, Bethel found some rationale in them. And if the target was Amon? Bethel glanced at Amon not far away, then retracted his gaze. He didn't actually feel any resistance. Amon, who overheard everything. Have you all forgotten that I'm still here? Of course, we haven't forgotten. I said all this knowing you were here. Lynn suddenly spoke, clearly aware of the thoughts of a certain unwilling to reveal their name Angel of Time. HMPH. In response, Amon adjusted his crystal monocle, let out a cold snort, said nothing, and left the deck, evidently not wanting to stay in the same airspace as a certain someone. Of course, whether the air contained some monocle-wearing avatars was unknown. End of chapter. Bethel Abraham watched Amon leave, feeling a subtle emotion. Is this what it feels like to torment others? It seems kind of fun. Mr. Dorr was on the verge of being corrupted. Lynn was satisfied with this scene, feeling that his efforts were effective. If Mr. Dorr could grasp the essence of being a trickster, he would make a good accomplice in tormenting others. Lynn believed that, given Mr. Dorr's nature, even if he became a trickster, his bottom line would still be much higher than that of Amon. Just like Klein, who, even after becoming a miracle invoker with increased mischief, still acted with restraint. This made Mr. Dorr perfect for handing over the tools when Lynn tormented others. By the way, Lynn suddenly remembered something. Looking at Mr. Dorr, he asked, Tutor should know about my existence now, right? Although he probably thinks I'm your child. Do you think there's a chance he'll summon me when we return to the Tudor Empire? As he said this, Lynn felt eager. There's indeed a high chance that His Majesty will summon you. Bethel Abraham confirmed Lynn's suspicion, then hesitantly asked, what do you plan to do? Nothing much, just want to meet this bold pathway jumper. After all, those who jumped pathways have always been few, and someone like Tudor who jumped from sequence 1 to another pathway's sequence 0 successfully is even rarer, Lynn said with a smile, looking genuinely interested without showing any flaw. Bethel Abraham's brow twitched because he suddenly remembered that the young man before him once said Medici called him brother. And Medici died at the hands of Alistair Tudor. Although Bethel Abraham didn't directly participate in that event, merely watching from the sidelines, he still knew some of the details. At this moment, Bethel Abraham was very worried about Tudor's safety. After all, a person who could easily defeat a tree of desire might find it easy to kill a sequence 0 who isn't in great condition. I'm not that ruthless, just planning to beat him up a bit, Lynn said suddenly, causing Bethel Abraham to doubt if he had accidentally spoken his thoughts aloud. No, you didn't speak your thoughts, but your expression was too obvious, Lynn said with a smile, glancing at the nearby air before continuing, and my condition isn't that good. Indeed, he wouldn't kill Tudor for Medici's revenge, as the cost was too high. Tudor represented more than just himself. It wasn't something Lynn could achieve by borrowing sequence 0 level power. The higher level cost was too much for Lynn to bear. Lynn had no assurance of maintaining his self after borrowing power beyond his limit again. Each time he borrowed power from his main body, it became increasingly difficult to maintain his own state afterward. So, Lynn thought it was enough to retrieve Little Red from history and beat up Tudor a bit to vent his anger for Little Red. As for the rest, he would let Little Red handle it. He wouldn't overstep his bounds here. So if you were in good condition, you'd go for it. Bethel Abraham controlled his expression and, after thinking for a while, said seriously, His Majesty rarely leaves the palace. It's not easy to ambush him. Lynn looked at Mr. Dorr with a subtle expression. I thought you would righteously denounce my plan to ambush him. Aren't you loyal to Tudor? Because I know I can't stop you or change your mind, Bethel Abraham said. As for loyalty, our relationship with Tudor is more about mutual benefit. There is some camaraderie, so if you wanted to kill him, I would try to stop you, though I doubt I'd succeed. But if you just want to beat him up for Medici, I won't stop you. Actually, His Majesty often beat us up to mediate between Amon, Antigonus, and me, Bethel said, maintaining a serious and solemn expression. Goodness, you're quite the dark horse. Lynn looked at Mr. Dorr as if discovering a new continent. He always knew Mr. Dorr wasn't naive, but the other party's usual serious demeanor made it hard to realize his hidden dark side. I am just stating facts. Bethel's expression remained unchanged, his tone still very serious. Okay, I get it. So Bethel, you're saying you'll help me ambush Tudor? Lynn smiled. Bethel Abraham remained silent for 2 seconds before seriously nodding. I can provide some help. He wasn't doing it for revenge. He was just worried that without supervision, Lynn might accidentally kill Tudor. With me there, I can at least help Tudor escape if things get out of hand. Bethel Abraham thought. Of course, if things don't get out of hand, he wouldn't mind landing a few more hits himself. Ads by PubFuture. Not out of revenge, just a slip of the hand. If you plan to beat up His Majesty, how about taking me along? I can offer some necessary help. Amon's voice suddenly appeared. Lynn wasn't surprised, he just looked at him, smiled, and nodded, sure. He wasn't surprised by Amon's involvement and could guess his reasons. Actually, we can also invite Antigonus. He's been wanting to beat up His Majesty for a long time, Amon suggested, adjusting his crystal monocle. Amon wanted to join this ambush partly to settle old scores, partly to test Lynn's strength, and partly to distract Lynn while gaining more of his trust. Inviting Antigonus was naturally to share the blame. Amon wasn't lying. Antigonus indeed held grudges over being beaten up and had long wanted to retaliate. Little Ant. Lynn recalled seeing Antigonus in the second epic, his eyes showing interest. He wondered if the other remembered him. Probably not, given the chaos of the battlefield. Antigonus might not have noticed him and Medici hiding nearby. Not that he cared. Alistair Tudor probably couldn't imagine that his most trusted lieutenants would, under someone's suggestion, quickly agree to ambush him. Indeed, the three families were loyal beyond words. ... End of chapter. Compared to the joy of the fourth epic, Lynn was much busier in the second epic, almost transforming into a corporate slave. After the ancient sun god approved the establishment of the Eye of Secrets, Lynn naturally couldn't slack off on this matter and had to start making himself busy. So, accompanied by Ouroboros, Lynn first selected the final location for the department, bringing with him the people temporarily assigned by Saussure to start building the future office space. Yes, the house was newly built, as there wasn't any existing building in the Divine Kingdom suitable for a school. Fortunately, most Beyonders are quite capable. Even when it comes to moving bricks, they do it faster than others. Lynn didn't intend to build a very large school overnight, so this step didn't take too long. Since the buildings in this period were quite natural, without any paint or similar materials, there was no need to worry about hazards like formaldehyde. Furthermore, any potential problems could be solved with extraordinary abilities. So, once the buildings were completed, they could be used immediately. After resolving the school issues, Lynn utilized a certain humanoid, Lucky Charm, to select an auspicious day, and together with Ouroboros, they began preparing the initial teaching materials. This part of the lesson preparation naturally focused on teaching the students literacy, helping them overcome illiteracy, and providing basic knowledge. Additionally, Lynn prepared some gifts for his dear students. Lynn, I brought the Beyonder materials you requested from Saussure for the Mystery Prior and Savon pathways. Here is the material list. Saussure asked me to tell you that if it's not enough, you can apply for more. Ouroboros said this while placing the various sized metal boxes he carried onto the table, filling the entire surface with these boxes. He then took out a roll of parchment from his pocket and handed it to Lynn. Thank you. Lynn, who was organizing his lesson plan, politely thanked him, took the parchment, and began checking the materials in the boxes. Indeed, the surprise Lynn prepared for the students' first day was the basic potions for the Sequence 9 of the Mystery Prior and Savon pathways. Lynn didn't plan to wait until after teaching the basics to make the students Beyonders. His idea was to first inform them of the dangers and precautions of becoming a Beyonder, and then directly let them advance by drinking the potions, with him and Ouroboros watching. Even if someone had an accident, they could be pulled back in time. After all, occult knowledge can be learned later. Literacy doesn't hinder advancement to Sequence 9, just like Klein, who only started learning about the occult after becoming a seer. The characteristics of the Mystery Prior and Savon potions would actually aid the students' learning later on. At least, they would gain a photographic memory buff. Perfect. Lynn quickly finished checking the materials, then looked at the 28 students sitting obediently at their desks. Behind him was the blackboard he had set up. Lynn wrote, "First lesson," on the blackboard with chalk, then turned to the students and cleared his throat, saying, "I don't think I need to introduce myself again. From today onwards, the Eye of Secrets is officially established. You are the first batch of members of the Eye of Secrets and my first batch of students. From this perspective, I have high hopes for you. The duties of the Eye of Secrets will not be detailed here. You only need to know that your most important task now is to learn. Learn basic knowledge, learn about the occult, learn how to become stronger, and how to survive better in this world." Lynn paused for a moment before continuing with a smile. The Eye of Secrets primarily follows the Mystery Prior and Savant pathways. As my students, you will choose one of these two pathways. I will now detail the dangers and precautions of becoming a Beyonder, as well as the relevant abilities of the Mystery Prior and Savant pathways. Of course, if any of you feel unsuited to these two pathways, you can tell me, and I will consider allowing you to choose other pathways. At this point, Lynn's expression became more serious as he continued. Ads by PubFuture, but I must state in advance that I am neither omniscient nor omnipotent. My expertise lies mainly in the abilities of the Mystery Prior and Savant pathways. So, if someone chooses another pathway, I may not be able to provide the best guidance. Lynn wasn't trying to scare anyone, just stating the truth. Each pathway focuses on different aspects. For instance, the warrior pathway emphasizes combat, and as a novice teacher, Lynn could confidently teach his own pathways, but not others. He simply didn't have the capability. Hearing this, the students exchanged looks but didn't speak. However, their expressions clearly conveyed one message: only a fool would choose a pathway other than Mystery Prior or Savant. This didn't surprise Lynn. No child of this era is naive. With his words making it clear, they naturally knew the best choice. Moreover, these students were carefully selected by Lynn, suited for the Mystery Prior or Savant pathways. Those clearly suited for the warrior pathway had already been recommended to the Red Army by Lynn. I wonder how little Red's army is doing. Lynn thought to himself and continued. If there are no objections, let's start the lesson. After the lesson, you'll choose your pathways. Teaching students is indeed laborious, but fortunately, my students are well behaved. In the fifth epoch, Lynn lazily stretched, feeling he was one step closer to Saucerier's corporate life. Lynn's second epoch persona was still teaching students, and they had reached the potion advancement stage. As expected, about 2/3 chose to become Mystery Priors, while the remaining third chose Savant potions. With Lynn and Ouroboros, both sequence 2, supervising, no one had any accidents, and all advanced safely. This reassured Lynn, who then began his literacy classes. End of chapter. With the support of the Savant potion and the Mystery Prior potion, the literacy course should end quickly. After that, I can start teaching them more formal occult knowledge. Lynn thought, multitasking as he controlled several Smurf accounts while his gaze fell on the stack of general textbooks from Silver City on the table. Indeed, while Lynn's fourth epic Smurf account was happily tormenting Amon, and his second epic Smurf account was officially becoming a teacher, his fifth epic main account wasn't just idling. First, Lynn visited several schools during this time, finally meeting all the teachers he planned to visit. However, Lynn was somewhat disappointed that Klein's halo of trouble didn't come into play during these trips, as everything went smoothly without any unexpected events. Secondly, just now, Lynn experienced his second tarot meeting. As usual, nothing significant happened during this meeting. Aside from successfully trading with Little Sun for a list of monsters around Silver City and the city's general textbooks, the only noteworthy event was the content of Russell's diary that Mr. Fool read this time. If Lynn guessed correctly, Mr. Fool should have read the diary related to Emperor Russell's youngest son, Bornova. The diary also introduced his favorite daughter, Bernadette, and his most unfortunate eldest son, Seal. Then, there was some introduction about the Sauron family and certain early days of Russell's governance as the consul of the Intis Republic. Following that, there was information about the Twilight Hermit Order, commonly known as the Twilight Otaku Group or the Twilight Hermit Senior Activity Center. Whoever came up with the name, Twilight Hermit Senior Activity Center, was a genius, Lynn thought, unable to suppress a laugh. You really can't blame him. After all, the terms, Twilight Otaku Group, and Twilight Hermit Senior Activity Center, are hard not to laugh at. It makes Amon's brother terrifying ancient coin instantly seem like an old man holding a teacup, playing chess and chatting with a group of old friends under the sunset. In a way, it makes sense since most of them are quite old. Lynn stroked his chin and nodded in agreement, then thought of another matter. If he remembered correctly, this time Russell's diary included the part about the Black Emperor card, right? Thinking of this, Lynn squinted his eyes. To be honest, he was quite interested in the Black Emperor card, not because of the formula for the Black Emperor pathway. Lynn didn't lack this formula. If he really wanted it, he could just ask Saucereer, his guardian, who was quite generous in this aspect. Lynn mainly wanted another sample to study the cards of blasphemy for replication. He had obtained the Red Priest card for some time and had made some progress in his research. But Russell, being the Knowledge Emperor of Sequence 1 in the Mystery Prior pathway, had created the cards of blasphemy. So, while Lynn had discovered some things, he still lacked sufficient information samples. And although the Black Emperor card wasn't specifically highlighted as a special card in the original novel like the Mother card, having an extra sample was always good. Of course, this didn't mean Lynn planned to compete with Klein for the card. After all, Lynn had no significant use for the card, it was purely for research purposes. Keeping it with Klein seemed better. Lynn was looking forward to seeing the various clever tricks Klein would perform with the Black Emperor. Not to mention, Miracle Klein and the Paper Angel from the Black Emperor card were quite interesting. To Lynn, this was more enjoyable than letting the card gather dust with him. Actually, Lynn's real plan was to exchange the Red Priest card with Klein after he got the Black Emperor card, study it thoroughly, and then exchange it back. This way, both he and Klein would gain something valuable. As for the nominal owner of the Red Priest card being Medici, that didn't matter. Lynn believed Little Red wouldn't mind such a thing. Speaking of the Black Emperor card, the Queen Mystic, Bernadette, seems to appear in this event. Should I try to bluff her? Maybe tell her I'm an old friend of her father. Though not now, who knows what the future holds, Lynn thought, his expression eager. He was quite interested in bluffing Bernie Huang, or rather, in reading Russell's diary to Bernadette. Lynn thought it would be very interesting. Ads by PubFuture. After all, once the great transmigrators of the cosmos disseminate Russell's diaries, the black history will spread eventually. In that case, why not let Bernie Huang know her father's dark secrets early? And in the future, if Lynn ever had the chance to drop a Smurf account in Russell's time, he would definitely kindly inform Russell of this. After such frank encounters, the father-daughter relationship would surely become more harmonious. Lynn couldn't help but laugh at this thought. So, this tells us that keeping a diary is fine, but never write your black history in it, or you'll face social death. Like him, Lynn would never write his black history in his diary, only noting down others. This way, even if his diary were to spread someday, it would be others facing social death, not him. But now there's still some time before the Russell exhibition with the Black Emperor card. Before that, the Salted Fish seems to be joining the Tarot Club first. Once she's in, I can naturally start investigating the Abraham family, Lynn thought, his gaze drifting to the opposite house at 15 Minsk Street. Klein is about to be promoted to Sequence 7 too. Lynn's expression turned slightly complex at the thought, speaking of which, due to my butterfly effect, Klein hasn't met Sharon and the others until now. Should I guide it a bit? Otherwise, it feels like a waste, especially since there's more to the Messenger Girl storyline. Lynn recalled something, a dangerous smile forming, and I almost forgot. Sharon's storyline represents the Rose school of thought. Everyone knows, Little Bubble is a vengeful person. And Bitch Tree, being an outer deity that forced Lynn to use excessive power and nearly got him killed, had long been blacklisted by Lynn. In this case, Lynn was more than happy to strike at the Rose school of thought, Bitch Tree's subordinates. After all, Lynn didn't think Bitch Tree wouldn't hold a grudge for being beaten. Therefore, it's better to act first. Black Emperor card, Bernie Huang, salted fish in the Abraham family, Rose School of Thought. Tisk, looks like my main account has a lot to do in the future. Indeed, I've been infected by the sorcerer virus. Lynn calculated, dramatically gasping, before taking out 008 and beginning to plan the next script. End of chapter. Achoo. Inside the Bravehearts bar, Klein, who was in disguise, suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose, not suspecting that someone was talking about him behind his back, but feeling that the alcohol fumes around him were too pungent. The reason Klein was here was simple: he came to attend a Beander gathering. The information provided by the Evernight Church mentioned the Bravehearts bar, so Klein knew that an old gentleman named Eye of Wisdom hosted a Beander gathering here. Although this Beander gathering was not as high level as the one hosted by Mr. A, it was sufficient for Klein, who was still at Sequence 8. Moreover, Klein's main reason for attending Beander gatherings was to gather information and expand his network, not to buy items. After not finding any interesting people or events mentioned by the Angelic Fellow at the Quelaag Club, Klein naturally followed his original plan to mingle at various Beander gatherings to search for clues related to the Angelic Transmigrator. Theoretically, such low-level Beander gatherings would not have clues about the Angel, but Klein was well aware of the Angel's mischievous nature, script mania, and their apparent attention to him. So Klein had no doubt that the other party would deliberately leave clues at the gatherings he attended, guiding him to complete an interesting script and, like the end of a play, meet him again through so-called trials. Even if there were no deliberate clues at these gatherings, attending more of them would eventually lead to encounters. This feeling of knowing someone is writing a script, but still having to step into it. Sigh. Thinking of this, Klein couldn't help but sigh slightly, but there was no way around it. This wasn't because of a church mission, but because Klein himself also wanted to meet this transmigrator again. Klein wanted to ask him about the mysteries of his transmigration and the gray fog. He wanted to know why he was worthy of the special attention of two big shots. And then there's Lynn. The Angel's attitude towards Lynn is also very special. In some ways, the Angel seems to care more about Lynn than about me. This isn't surprising, considering they are old friends. Thinking of a certain companion who didn't look angelic at all, Klein's expression turned subtle. Lynn's prophecy from 1,000 years ago is also a big problem. Why can a transmigrator be prophesied about? What secret lies within this, and why has Lynn fallen from being an angel to his current state? Klein felt a headache coming on. As he continued to interact with the Angel, the mysteries before him only increased. Initially, Klein just wanted to find the angelic compatriot to ask about transmigration and returning home, and at most, he was curious about the gray fog. But later, when Klein realized the special attention the Evernight goddess had for him, got to know Lynn, and learned about the prophecy from 1,000 years ago, the things he wanted to know also increased without him realizing it. And the Angel Fellow clearly declared his existence during this process. He didn't hide his special attention to Klein, nor did he hide a fact: Klein was special. There were other transmigrators, but Klein discovered that he seemed to be the most special one. Russell didn't encounter an angel transmigrator, though the Emperor's life was also legendary. But maybe he did, and I haven't read that part of the diary yet. Klein thought with a headache. If there was anything more puzzling than these mysteries, it was the purpose behind the angels wanting him to become friends with Lynn. People always have their reasons for doing things. If the angel's script in Tingen was for 008, reporting Linnevis was to stop the descent of the true creator, and his special attention to Klein was due to some unknown peculiarity of his. Then what was the reason for guiding him to meet Lynn? Adds by PubFuture. It couldn't be to resolve the dangers brought by the ambassador to Lynn. That would be a small problem for an angel. Looking at the overall picture, it seems more like it was to bring Lynn to me, making sure we meet smoothly through deliberate guidance. Klein pondered, and it can't just be to involve me in events like Linnevis's through Lynn. With my situation, if the angel wanted me involved in these events, he could have just found someone to inform me. Rather than focusing on these details, perhaps I should pay more attention to Lynn himself. Klein almost subconsciously frowned. Lynn is undoubtedly a very special existence. He was once an angel, possibly even the son of Mr. Dorr, and he predicted Azek's fate and my existence 1,000 years ago. Even now, 1,000 years later, despite losing his powers for unknown reasons and restarting his divine path, Lynn still holds many secrets. He knows many potion formulas and understands many secrets that low-sequence Beyonders shouldn't. Klein thought, gradually finding the key point. Such an old friend from 1,000 years ago arrived early by his side, guiding him into various events. Even the previous Mr. Keeper, who, considering his level, probably wasn't an ordinary craftsman, might also be an old friend of Lynn. In other words, Lynn, the former angel with prophetic abilities, probably didn't lose his memory by accident. At least, he had anticipated it and prepared for it. And he predicted Azek's fate 1,000 years ago, foresaw my existence. Then, in the present day, 1,000 years later, the amnesiac Lynn met me under the guidance of the angel. Previously overlooked clues exploded in Klein's mind. He suddenly understood one thing. Perhaps it wasn't the angel who wanted him to meet Lynn, but the former Libert Abraham, who had prophetic abilities, who foresaw something and arranged all this. What did he foresee? What requires Lynn and me to become friends to achieve? Having figured out the key, the mysteries in Klein's heart only grew. Unfortunately, Lynn, the other party involved in the mystery, was in an amnesiac state and knew nothing. And honestly, even if Klein realized that Lynn might have had a hand in arranging things, he couldn't bear any grudge against him. Because despite everything, Lynn, that damn guy, was still a genuinely good friend. End of chapter. If Libert's goal is to become friends with me and then leverage my unique abilities to achieve their purpose in the future, they might have already succeeded halfway. Klein sighed, his smile tinged with helplessness. Upon reflection, although he hadn't known Lynn for a very long time, if Lynn ever needed his help in the future and it didn't go against his principles or require him to risk his life, Klein knew he wouldn't be able to refuse. Similarly, he was aware that if he ever needed Lynn's help, Lynn might complain a bit, but would definitely be willing to assist. Perhaps this was also within their expectations. Klein sighed again, then raised his hand to rub his temples as he thought of another matter. But no matter what, with Lynn suffering from amnesia, the only one who might know the truth now is the angel from my hometown. The situation had come full circle. Regardless of who had written the script regarding Klein's fate, he would need to find the angel from his hometown to get answers. Damn it, what's with these big shots and their love for writing scripts? The angel from my hometown is like this, and the former Lynn seemed to have this habit too. But it felt more like arrangements made based on prophecy. Klein muttered inwardly, a vague idea suddenly flashing in his mind. Could it be that the angel from his hometown was also making arrangements based on prophecy? Their seemingly casual, yet carefully thought-out scripts might not be the result of meticulous planning but rather foreknowledge. Even random jottings appeared to be precisely arranged. After all, there's a saying that the most terrifying conspiracy is foreseeing the future. The angel from his hometown and Lynn. Klein almost subconsciously thought of a possibility but then immediately dismissed it. Impossible. They can't be the same person. The angel from my hometown would have no reason to stay by my side as Lynn. If they wanted to be friends, they could have done so directly, using their identity as my fellow townsmen and their life-saving grace in Tingen. They could have become my friend much faster than Lynn. Klein thought rationally. In fact, so far, though I'm unhappy with their arrangements, I can't really dislike them. This was true. The angel from his hometown had never crossed the line. They had saved Klein and done Smith's lives initially, prevented the calamity of an evil god's offspring, helped Klein kill Lenevis to avenge Tingen, and recently reported the Desire Apostle behind the Devil Dog, thus avoiding retribution from the Desire Apostle. Even regarding the Quelaag Club, while Klein wasn't sure what was hidden there, the angel from his hometown had shown goodwill by warning him. They could have easily chosen not to. Therefore, although the angel from his hometown was quite enigmatic and made Klein want to drag them out for a beating, he didn't actually dislike them. In fact, Klein was grateful to them. Regardless of their motives, without them, Klein and the entire Tingen team might have fallen to 008 and Ince Zangwill's schemes, and there would be no present. Despite wanting to advance and free myself from this predetermined fate, which nobody likes, even if it's well-intentioned. Klein's thoughts drifted slightly before he pulled himself back. Lynn and the angel from my hometown, they aren't the same person, but their relationship might be closer than I initially thought. Klein originally believed the angel from his hometown and the former Lynn were old friends with some sort of deal, which was why they were particularly caring towards the amnesiac Lynn. But now Klein felt their relationship might not be that simple. Too many doubts and similarities made Klein's head hurt more. He rubbed his temples, deciding to stop thinking about the mysterious hometown angel and his silly little partner. Klein's gaze swept through the bar, looking for the local leader described by the informant from the Evernight Church, Kaspars Kalinin. Before Klein could find the target matching the description, he paused at the sight of a man sitting quietly by the bar, drinking. The man in a white shirt and black vest had deep black eyes filled with restrained, suppressed malice, making his pale, almost lifeless face look even more eerie and frightening. A Beander, Klein immediately judged, but he quickly averted his gaze without doing anything noticeable. He could tell that despite the man by the bar seeming dangerous, he was controlling himself. The malice leaking out unintentionally seemed more like it stemmed from the pathway itself rather than indicating the man was inherently bad. Ads by PubFuture. To be honest, such behavior made Klein almost subconsciously think of the keyword, Temperance Faction. Since arriving in Backland, Klein had read some materials about the Rose School of Thought due to his higher clearance, including descriptions of the Temperance Faction. Although it might be a coincidence, the man indeed fit the Temperance Faction's description. Klein muttered inwardly, noting the man's appearance while planning to first find Kaspars Kalinin. Since the man in the white shirt and black vest was also in the Brave Bar at this time, he was likely another attendee of the gathering. At the very least, as the local leader, Kaspars Kalinin might know something about him. As a Nighthawk, Klein couldn't just ignore a potential member of a hidden organization. At the very least, he had to gather some information to confirm the man's harmlessness. But if the man was indeed a member of the Temperance Faction, why would he be here? This Braveheart's bar is dangerous, it just tripled Klein IQ. End of chapter.